Well, I want to go out to Melissa and explain what a dominatrix is, what you did and what guys seem to want from you.
Okay, well, as a dominatrix, I worked at a very upscale dungeon in Midtown Manhattan, where my clients would pay me to enact role play scenes that they spent a lot of time fantasizing about. And most of these scenes involved me playing sort of an iconic female role, either mommy, babysitter, cheerleader, or the essential sort of dominatrix character with the thigh-high boots and the corset. But there was no sex and no nudity. It was really sort of a private acting job.
Simone, aren't you concerned that this is just a traumatic reenactment? Mommy was traumatic, babysitter was traumatizing, and then you go and have to reenact it over again in role play, which is not necessarily bad, but it leaves the trauma unresolved.
Absolutely, but everything on a spectrum, because there has been research that is coming out just now which is saying that actually by changing the outcome of the role play,
being in control of it,
that can be healing. But this work has to be done with a therapist. And I agree with you, if you are just going and reenacting, then yes, it can be very, very damaging.
And Melissa, what kind of guys were visiting you? Who were these men?
Most of them were upper middle class New York City residents, a lot of stockbrokers, probably because it's an expensive hobby to have, but they really sort of ran the whole spectrum. There were professors and doctors and police officers and just about everybody you can think of, and most of them were I hate to generalize, but pretty well adjusted. They had successful marriages and jobs, and while I do think that the reenactment of childhood traumas could potentially be damaging for a lot of my clients, they had sort of successfully incorporated this practice into their everyday life.
Do you think their wives or girlfriends knew about this?
I think that oftentimes they didn't, and you have to remember that I worked in the commercial side. I wasn't a part of the overall sort of SM community, in which there are many different kinds of highly functioning, successful relationships that
Melissa,
employ a lot of these practices.
Is what you were doing legal?
Because there was no sex involved, it was legal.
Okay. Take a quick call. Danita in Nebraska. Danita.
Yeah, I work with this coworker, and she was in a 4-year relationship. And they bought a house and get ready to have live together. And within a few days after reading these 3 books, she kicked her boyfriend out. She was on the internet trying to find guys. She was hooking up with guys that she knew in the past. And one of your callers said that it was people that have control. Well, this young woman had never had any control of her life, and now she's doing this, which is going to make her life even more harder. So, people say that book's great and it might be enjoyable to read, but it is causing problems. This woman's going to have a worse life because of her actions she's doing now.
Well, this is what we call sexual acting out. This is the kind of thing that somebody should pull her aside and say, hey, don't blame the book. You got a problem. We got to see somebody professionally.
And on the other hand, and I really hear both of you, and Danita, I hear you as well. On the other hand, she could feel empowered, and she could say, you know what, if she doesn't act out sexually, if she says, I want a different life, then maybe this book can be useful. But I also will repeat the point I said, crime books, we can pathologize those. They, to me, terrify me about what they can do to our psyche.
Melissa, I got about 30 seconds, why did you quit your career as a dominatrix?
Because I wasn't interested in playing out erotic scenarios with total strangers anymore. It just wasn't for me, as you can imagine, maybe.
And was that a healthy move?
It was a healthy move. I regret absolutely nothing, and it definitely gave me a bigger acceptance of my own desires, as I think this book has the power to do for some people. But when it was time to get out, I got out, and that was definitely the right decision.
Well,